Madam C.J. Walker, self-made success. In the quiet of an early morning, picture a small wooden house at the edge of a crowded neighborhood. A young woman wakes before the sun rises, her hands rough from years of labor, her heart heavy with the knowledge that another long day awaits. She looks into a small, cracked mirror, adjusting her hair with frustration. For women of color in the early 1900s, this daily struggle with hair was not simply about appearance. It was about dignity, confidence, and a sense of belonging in a world that often refused to see their worth. This is the world Madam C.J. Walker was born into, a world where opportunities seemed locked away, reserved for others, never for her. Yet even in those quiet mornings filled with worry, she carried a spark, an unshakable belief that she could change not only her life, but also the lives of countless women who shared her struggles. Welcome to Learn English Listening. I am Lydia, your guide through stories of extraordinary people who teach us not only English, but also courage and vision. Today, we step into the remarkable life of Madam C.J. Walker, a woman who rose from the harshest poverty to become the first self-made female millionaire of her community. But before we go deeper, let me ask you something. What part of the world are you in as you hear this story? Are you listening in a busy city, in a quiet small town, or perhaps on your way to work? I'd love to know. Her story begins with struggle, yet it unfolds into innovation, resilience, and the breaking of barriers. And as you listen, you may find pieces of your own journey reflected in hers. Madam C.J. Walker, born Sarah Breedlove in 1867, carried a story marked by hardship from the very start. She was the daughter of formerly enslaved parents in Louisiana, and by the time she was 7 years old, she had already lost both mother and father. Orphaned at such a tender age, she grew up working in cotton fields, learning early that life demanded resilience even before she understood what the word meant. As a teenager, she married young, seeking stability in a world that rarely offered it to women of her background. By the age of 20, she was widowed with a small daughter to raise. Life pressed heavily upon her, forcing her into long hours of washing clothes for other families. The steam from boiling tubs, the sting of soap, the exhaustion of endless scrubbing. These were not just chores. They were survival. In her 20s, she also faced a deeply personal battle. Her hair began to fall out, partly due to the lack of access to proper hygiene products, partly due to stress and poor nutrition. For many women, hair was more than just strands. It was a crown, a source of self-respect. Losing it felt like losing a piece of herself. And yet, it was in this very struggle that the seed of transformation was planted. Think about your own journey. Have you ever carried a burden no one else could see? Maybe it was stress hidden behind a smile, or doubts you kept to yourself while pretending everything was fine. Madam C.J. Walker knew that silent battle well, but she also understood something deeper. Struggle can be a mirror. It shows us what is broken, but it can also reveal where new beginnings might grow. For her, that brokenness became the ground from which innovation would rise. Every breakthrough begins with a moment of courage, the decision to see a problem not only as pain, but also as possibility. For Madam C.J. Walker, that moment came when she realized the struggles with her own hair could point to a larger truth. Thousands of women around her were fighting the same silent battle. While the market ignored their needs, she chose to imagine something different. She began experimenting with formulas in her small kitchen, mixing oils and natural ingredients late at night after long workdays. Many attempts failed, but she persisted. What drove her was not only the hope of healing her own scalp, but the belief that she could create something revolutionary for others. It was the seed of innovation, a mindset that refused to accept limits. This is where her story reveals the hidden key to growth. It was not wealth, privilege, or easy access to resources. It was her mindset, her willingness to learn, to adapt, and to keep pushing forward. 3 simple English phrases capture this spirit. The first is self-made. It means shaping your own destiny with your own hands, even when the odds are against you. Madam C.J. Walker embodied this truth as she built her business from nothing. The second is break barriers. It means refusing to let walls, whether social, financial, or cultural, define how far you can go. She broke barriers not only for herself, but for an entire community of women who had been told to stay small. The third is learning never stops. She never saw herself as finished. Every formula she mixed, every sales strategy she tried, was part of a continuous journey of learning. This phrase reminds us that growth is not a destination. It is a lifelong practice. Her persistence was more than stubbornness. It was vision. Each failure in her experiments felt like a closed door, yet she saw it as proof that one more door was waiting to be opened. She learned to trust the slow process, to embrace mistakes as hidden lessons shaping her path forward. When we take these words to heart, they become more than language. They become tools for living. Madam C.J. Walker's hidden key was not magic. It was persistence, creativity, and a refusal to stop learning when life told her to quit. From the small bottles mixed in her kitchen, Madam C.J. Walker's vision began to spread. At first, she sold her products door to door, speaking directly with women who had lived the same frustrations she once felt. Each conversation was not only about hair care, but about confidence, about walking taller in a world that often tried to diminish them. Her business grew because she understood more than a need. She understood a dream. Soon she opened her own company, creating jobs for thousands of women. Imagine the power of that moment. Women who had been limited to domestic labor were suddenly earning their own income, traveling as sales agents, and discovering independence. Walker did not just sell products. She created a movement. Her story turned into a living example of what it means to break barriers. But the climb was never easy. She faced fierce competition, doubts from others, and constant reminders that society did not expect a Black woman to succeed at such a scale. Yet, instead of shrinking back, she leaned in. She wore elegant gowns, traveled across the country, and spoke with authority about business and empowerment. She declared through her actions, "I belong here." Think about your own routines. Is there one habit you'd like to break free from? Perhaps it's the habit of doubting yourself or holding back your ideas because you fear others won't take you seriously. Like Madam C.J. Walker, breaking barriers often begins with the courage to step forward even when the room seems to say, "You don't belong." When she stood before crowds of women, speaking with fire about dignity and independence, the atmosphere shifted. These gatherings were not only business meetings. They were moments of awakening. Many women walked away not just with products in hand, but with a new sense of possibility pulsing in their hearts. Her emotional climax was not only becoming America's first self-made female millionaire of her background, it was showing the world that possibility itself could be rewritten, and once rewritten, it could never return to the narrow script of before. When the noise of business slowed and the crowds faded, Madam C.J. Walker's true legacy shone brightest in the lives she touched. She often said that her wealth was not measured only in dollars, but in the opportunities she created for others. Through her training programs, she equipped women with skills, confidence, and a sense of purpose that went far beyond a paycheck. Think of it like a garden. The seed was her innovation, but the real beauty was in the field of flowers that bloomed around her. Women who once had no choices now standing strong, supporting their families, and building communities. Just as damaged hair can be nourished back to health, she reframed hardship into growth. The storms of discrimination and doubt could have broken her spirit, yet she chose another path. She saw herself not as a victim of circumstances, but as a vessel for change. Her story reminds us that healing does not erase the scars. Instead, it gives those scars new meaning. For us, the lesson is clear. Every obstacle carries the potential for renewal. Every closed door can lead us to invent a new key. Madam C.J. Walker reframed poverty into power, rejection into resilience, and limitations into legacy. And in doing so, she left us a reminder that even the hardest seasons can nurture a new harvest of hope. Even in her final years, she continued giving generously, funding schools and supporting civil rights causes. Her healing extended beyond individuals to entire communities. It was as if her life whispered, "True wealth multiplies when it is shared," creating ripples of hope far beyond what money alone can measure. At the end of her journey, Madam C.J. Walker stood not only as a successful entrepreneur, but as a symbol of what it means to rise above limits. She proved that being self-made is not simply about building wealth. It is about building courage, opportunity, and change. Her story challenges each of us to ask, what barriers are we willing to break, and whose lives might be lifted when we do? Right now, imagine yourself at a crossroad. On one side lies comfort, the safe routines, the familiar doubts, the quiet voice that says, "Stay where you are." On the other side lies growth, the uncertainty of risk, the challenge of stepping into places where others may not expect you, the chance to write a story no one thought possible. At this moment, you stand between comfort and growth. Which path will you take? If this video gave you something meaningful, share it with someone who needs encouragement today. And subscribe to keep walking with us on this journey of English and self-growth. Together, we can practice language, learn resilience, and remember that every new phrase, every new step, is a chance to open a wider door. The legacy of Madam C.J. Walker whispers to us still, breaking barriers is never easy, but it is always worth it.